Welcome to the PrePost Film Review. I'm Matt Stevenson.
And I'm Jon Asquith. We've got a little bonus episode for all your little ears out there today. We're going to be talking about the 2017 London Film Festival, which Matt went to recently. And saw a bunch of movies there, good and bad, I presume.
Yep.
And so it's sort of a tradition for us to go to the film festival in each of our cities that we're in and report back and talk about the highlights and some of the disappointments. So we try to keep these pretty energetic and fun because a lot of the movies are hard to see. So we don't want to bore you guys too much, but stick around and hopefully you might learn of some hidden gems, or there's even some fairly big popular movies this time around actually. So should be an interesting chat. So I'll just throw it straight over to you, Matt, and let's go through your little list.
Yeah, cool. So I saw, as is usually the case, probably too many films to specifically talk about all of them. I saw about 24, which is, I think probably about average for me for film festivals. It was a pretty good year, I think. Overall, I think I was actually a little disappointed with the quality of the films. Maybe not necessarily the quality of the films, but perhaps I think there was quite a few that I was looking forward to or received a lot of buzz that I was excited about that perhaps didn't live up to my expectations, which I might touch on. There wasn't really any smaller films that jumped out and blew me away like that there often is in these festivals. So I kind of when I created my little list here, the sort of top few, my favourites that I saw are quite mainstream or bigger films that I guess it is good in the sense that a lot of you listeners will be able to see them, or it'll be easier to find them, but perhaps not as interesting if you're hoping to find some hidden gems. There are a few little hidden gems in there that I'll mention, but at least my two favourite films that I saw were both quite large releases that are easy to find.
Okay.
So I guess we can start there. I will start with the things that I liked. So I think the best thing that I saw, or at least my favourite, was the new Yorgos Lanthimos film, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is his, fourth or fifth actually film. So this is his follow-up to The Lobster, which I don't know, did you ever catch that, John?
No, it's on my list, but no, I missed. That was a big one I missed last.
Yeah, he had, for listeners who are familiar with Lanthimos, he has a very sort of distinct style. It's very kind of cold, weird, stilted dialogue. His films kind of have this surrealist kind of edge to them. And I would say this, Killing of a Sacred Deer, perhaps isn't as successful as The Lobster. I think The Lobster, it wears its metaphor kind of right out there on its sleeve. It's very obvious what The Lobster is about right from the get-go, whereas Killing of a Sacred Deer is a bit more murky, a bit more opaque as to what it's actually getting at. But the dark vibe and the strangeness of the film, I just love it. I love his style, I guess. And this film goes places that are perhaps not as weird as The Lobster, but certainly darker and much more intense, I would say. And yeah, I loved it. And really great performances by Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman, and the young kid that was in Dunkirk. Barry Coogan or Keegan or something. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his surname. But he's like quite a strange looking kid. I don't quite know how to describe him. He's very odd looking, and he's kind of like, after Colin Farrell, the sort of central character in Killing of a Sacred Deer, and he's great in it. I think he's sort of like turning into one to watch. I think he, or hopefully he, sort of becomes a really interesting character actor, because he seems to be picking interesting things, and I really like him.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, Killing of a Sacred Deer. That's the favourite thing I saw, and probably quite easy to find if it's not playing in cinemas now, you'll be able to find it on streaming and DVD and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I'm super keen to check that one out, for sure.
It might even be interesting, perhaps, I guess, whether we do this or The Lobster, but do a little bonus episode, or maybe a little Lanthimos retrospective, because Dogtooth as well is really good. And Alps I haven't seen, so I'd be keen to catch up on that. So potentially for the future in the pod.
I'd be up for that, definitely.
I think they'd be right up your alley, John.
Yeah.
Cool. So my second favourite thing
What's next?
is one that we've both seen, John. So we can chat about this a little bit.
Called Jumanji.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the jungle. No, it is the new Martin McDonagh film, 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri.
Yes.
So I think you've just seen this, so you're a little bit fresher than me. So perhaps you can give your take, but just briefly, I suppose. I really liked In Bruges a lot, and then I was very disappointed with Seven Psychopaths, and I feel like this is a return to form for him, and is much more in the vein of In Bruges, in the kind of like weird, dark comedy with some interesting sort of ideas under the surface. But yeah, what did you think, John? Do you agree? Did you like the film?
Yeah, I loved it, actually.
Cool.
I found it really darkly funny, as you say, quite confronting, and also had quite a lot to chew on thematically, and it seemed very appropriate for the times we're in, particularly in America, I think, in 2017, with all this sort of anger that's around everywhere and seems to be driving a lot of the politics and cultural discussion over there. I thought it was fantastic. I think all the performances are just incredible, particularly Frances McDormand, who's just, astounding in the movie, and has although she's pissed off for most of the movie, there's like different layers of how angry she is and how depressed and upset she is. She just delivers like an amazing performance. But the whole cast is great, and I think every character is written so well, and so they all have a complexity to them, and they all are introduced almost as a stereotype, and you're like, oh, I hate this person or I like this person, and then the movie kind of flips it or shows you another side of them where you have to deal with them as a person. And the movie is almost kind of about that, about not letting your first impression or your anger get the best of you, and having empathy and realizing that everyone has their own shit going on. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's just entertaining on a very base level, but there's a lot more to it as well. I thought it was great. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what more I can add. I kind of feel exactly the same way. It's one of those movies that, as I was watching it, at least for the first half maybe, it kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, I feel like some of the...
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
The actions that some of the characters take, and some of the more vile characters, it's just kind of not fun to watch. And it does have this streak of dark humour where you're often laughing at scenes that are quite confronting.
Yes. Yeah.
And I sort of didn't know how to feel about that for a little bit, I think. But until I sort of realised what the film was doing and settled into the tone of the film, and like you said, once it starts turning things on their heads and you start seeing that there's more complexity and it's not just these black and white characters that you're kind of laughing at the horrific situations. Yeah, it's a fascinating little film, I think, and Oscar bait for sure, right? Like Frances McDormand has to win awards for this, I would think.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we're on the same page. And again, another one that's easy to find. I'm sure it's getting a big release. If it's not already out in cinemas, you'll be able to find it streaming and DVD and all that sort of stuff. Cool. So
sweet. What's next? Matthew D.
And the next film was my favourite film for most of the festival. That's one I saw very early in the festival, and it was my favourite film for most of the festival. And then I saw Killing of a Sacred Deer and Three Billboards like right at the end, because they were like the closing night film. And
yeah,
I mean, I think they both just... The performances are so showy, and something like Killing of a Sacred Deer is so stylistically up my alley that it maybe skewed it to be at the front of the list. Whereas I think this third film is maybe the best, or at least the most interesting film. And that's a film called Foxtrot, which is an Israeli film. And it's, on the surface, kind of about grief and dealing with the loss of a son. So it's kind of about this father or these parents who learn that their son has been killed in the war. And it's kind of about how they deal with that. But then it's also... A big chunk of it is sort of flashbacks to the son in his post during the war. And you kind of... It's sort of non-linear. So when you're cutting back to the parents as well, there's sort of time jumps. So you're not quite sure whether it's before or after they found out that he's been killed. And this all sounds very grim, but it's not. It's very funny. And it's... The posting that the son is in is kind of this, like, him and these 2 or 3 other guys are just in this like shipping container, and they're just monitoring like this most mundane border crossing, and there's this like wacky like dance sequences, and really interestingly there's a couple of significant animated sequences throughout the film. Like he has this sort of diary where he draws these sketches that sort of come to life. So it's visually very interesting. It just deals with a lot of interesting stuff. It sort of takes this hard, somber subject matter and makes it into something fun. Not entirely fun, like it's heart-wrenching in moments and tough to watch in moments, but it's just a super unique, super interesting little film. And again, I probably, in terms of foreign films, I feel like I'm shouting out like the most known quantities. You know, this is going to be like one of the big contenders for best foreign film at the Oscars. I feel like I don't think it's any news to anyone that it's good, but it's great. And I think I'm not sure, especially in Australia, what the release is. So yeah, I'm not sure how easy it will be to find, but hopefully it at least pops up on some streaming platforms, or you know, if it does get Oscar nominated and potentially wins anything, I'm sure that will make it easier. Like it'll pop up on screen somewhere. But yeah, Foxtrot. Hunt it down. Great. It's really, really good. Yeah, no, will do. I actually haven't really heard of that one. Cool. So it's a little surprise, little treat for you, John. Little treat. Little fox treat. And then I might just quickly run through my top 5. So this next 2, which again are actually smaller films. Okay. So 4, I'm already regretting picking this as my 4th because I have no fucking idea how to pronounce the name. It's called Hagazusa, I think. And this is my horror film. Gesundheit. This is my horror film. Thank you, John. Usually there's a horror film. Yes. We always look forward to this. This is our little tradition, I feel like, in festivals. And interestingly, this shares very similar DNA to something like The Witch. I mean, it is about very similar subject matter in terms of witches in like a similar time period. So yeah, this is a German film. So it's like a German take on The Witch, John. And given how much you like The Witch, but it's also, it's not as, I think The Witch is probably a better film in terms of the sort of breakdown of the family structure and that infighting. This doesn't sort of tackle that so much. It's more one woman who is suspected of being a witch and her kind of mental breakdown, and all these horror elements start pretty early, but they ramp up as the film goes along, and there's slightly sort of a question of how much is this is real and how much of this is her in her mind, given that like her surroundings are telling her that she's this horrible thing and she's starting to believe it, and all this like messed up shit's happening. And I mean, it's also similar to The Witch, I suppose. It's quite slow and it's moody, like it's not in your face horror, though towards the end it goes places that are pretty full on. But I don't know. I really connected with this, and I found it really unsettling. Even if it's but it probably didn't have the budget or the sort of level of production design or something like The Witch. Not that had a huge budget, but they did a really great job of constructing a lot of physical stuff. Like a lot of this is kind of just out in the forest, running about. So it doesn't kind of have that palpable feel or sense of time and place as The Witch did. But for a small budget, like German horror film, I loved it. I thought it was really, really effective and really, really unsettling. And you should definitely check it out. And I feel like this will be a tough one to find. I don't know where you're going to find this, but keep an eye out for Hagazusa. we'll put it in the show notes. So
if you go into a bathroom in the dark and say Hagazusa
3 times in the mirror,
the DVD pops out. Yeah. That sounds fantastic, and I sound like a broken record, but I really do want to check that one out as well. That's actually probably at the top of my list.
I feel like you'd like it, but then again, also, I went in with zero expectations. In fact, I suspected it to be quite bad, given that it had a very strange title and was this German film I'd never heard of. So I was very pleasantly surprised. So I do worry a little bit with people going in with high expectations that they might be underwhelmed. Like, it is a small German art film, But I think you'd like it. I think you'd definitely get something out of it, even if you didn't love it as much as I did.
Yeah, great.
And rounding out my top 5, John, is something actually that we don't often talk about on this podcast. It's a documentary, and it's a foreign documentary. It's a film called Makala, which is a French documentary about a family, or specifically the husband or the man in the family who lives in the Congo and sells charcoal. So it's kind of one of those documentaries that is very hands-off-y. Like there's no voiceover, there's no text on screen. We kind of just follow a family. Like follow basically like a couple of days in the life of this guy as he, or maybe a couple of weeks, I suppose, as he kind of cuts the wood down and then like builds this sort of furnace-y thing out of like dirt and hay and grass, and like burns the wood down to charcoal and packs it all into bags, and then on his little push bike that's stacked ridiculously high with bags, like goes down the road for days. Like it takes him days to get from his village to like where the kind of little town is where he can try and sell it, and then he's selling it for like, a couple of cents a bag, like something ridiculously small. Like it's unbelievable. It's just like one of those really intimate tales of hardship, and really eye-opening in terms of what other cultures and other lives are like. I just found it really, really affecting, and really small things like this. You watch him do all this stuff and the pain and effort that it's taken him to get all this charcoal. And he's got like a wife and, family back home that he's trying to support. And he's like riding down the road at one point and puts his like bike on the stand to like take a break, and his bike falls over and one of the bags cracks open, and it's just like, it's a tiny little thing, but it's just like so heartbreaking. So anyway, yes, so it's just, I found it a very effective, heart-wrenching in some ways portrait of life that's so far removed from the way we experience life in our comfy Western society.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, it's gorgeously shot, like stunningly shot. It looks breathtaking. So yeah, if you can find Makala somewhere, definitely check it out. Highly recommended. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. And I love those sorts of documentaries or glimpses into a completely different life other than your own. And certainly that subject matter in particular sort of makes you appreciate how lucky we are in our culture and how you get shitty when your phone doesn't have reception or something.
Yeah.
You just need to like chill out.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's good.
Cool. So that were my favourites. So perhaps I might just quickly mention a couple of films that I was super excited for. I had two in particular that were or three maybe, that were kind of my most anticipated of the festival, and all three, while I enjoyed them, just did not live up to expectations. So first was the film Good Time. So this is Robert Pattinson's new film, and it is the second film, I think. I don't think it's the debut, but maybe the second film by these two brothers. And it was hyped as being sort of this super intense chase film that kind of doesn't let up from the get-go. And I was very, very amped for it. It kind of has a very synthy 80s vibe. I'd seen some stills from it, I think, or maybe even some clips, and it has some really cool sort of neon-y visuals. And it's kind of like this intense nightmare of a night where it's literally just following one night in this guy's life where everything sort of goes wrong. And it kind of is that, but I don't know, it just wasn't as intense and exciting as I anticipated. I still enjoyed it, but it just didn't blow me away. Maybe my expectations were a little bit too high. But it also goes... I do have a little bit of an issue. I just felt a little bit yuck. There's a scene in the middle where he is sort of hiding out with this teenage girl who I think is like 13 or something, and it's sort of played for laughs that he has to kind of seduce her in order to like distract her from his brother who's hiding with him. I don't know, it was just like a little bit yuck, and I don't know, felt a bit weird to me. I felt a bit uncomfortable. I mean, maybe that was the point, but it didn't seem like the film was acknowledging that to me. It felt like it was playing it as a joke, not as something that you were meant to like question. But having said that, it does have a really cool like pulsing synth soundtrack that kind of like propels the film along. And a really cool trailer, actually, given that we often talk about trailers. The trailer's really good.
Yeah.
So I recommend watching the trailer. I recommend watching the film, but perhaps don't expect it to blow your mind. It's not anything that new and exciting. And the pulsating tension isn't as unforgiving as what I'd been led to believe. Like, it has its normal peaks and lulls, like a normal film, whereas I thought this was going to be like a crazy intense 90 minutes of non-stop adrenaline, and it's kind of not. But still quite interesting. And Robert Pattinson's I'm starting to really like him. I mean, I sort of have for a while now, since he started working with Cronenberg and stuff. He's making interesting choices. I think he's he's come out of those Twilight films looking pretty good, or at least making good picks.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So what are the others?
So the other one I was going to mention, or the first of the other two, was the Florida Project. This is one that I feel like is getting a lot of awards buzz. It's the Sean Baker's follow-up to Tangerine, which I actually haven't seen, so maybe that was also part of the issue. Like, I had nothing to go on other than I knew people were absolutely in love with this film. I had no concept of what his sort of style was like. I thought it was good, but it is, and the more I get away from it, the more I appreciate it. But it kind of was a little less significant, or felt, I don't know, a bit not as meaningful or weighty as I expected. And I know the point of it is to sort of not judge these characters, and I sort of love it for doing that. You have to spend so much time watching a horrible mother be the worst parent to this little girl, and watch this little girl be a little fucking monster, which is like, it's an incredible performance. And part of me appreciates the honesty of like, kids can be little shits, but you can just see how the bad parenting is causing this. which is fine. Like, I like the fact that there's no moral judgment on it. It's just presenting it. But the fact that you have to sit through it for like 2 hours it just becomes a bit taxing for me. And it was just a bit much. Having said that, Willem Dafoe, who plays the hotel manager, because basically it's about these hotels sort of are next to Disneyland where these unemployed families often end up getting stuck and living in these hotels, and he's the manager of this particular hotel that houses the mother and daughter, and he is amazing. So he's kind of this father figure to both of them, really, and he just he's endearing and warm, and he just wants to help everyone, but he has like a realistic edge. Like, he gets frustrated and yells at them and tells them to fuck off sometimes, but his heart is so in the right place. It's just such a real, honest, beautiful performance. He is incredible. But like I said, the kids are amazing. Like, you don't think it's acting. Like, it's too good to be acting, but from what I've read and heard about behind the scenes stuff, it was all scripted and acted, and that blows my mind. Like, it's amazing, the performances he got out of these kids. But like I said, for me, it was a slog to get like unpleasant at times, and that might be the point, but I didn't feel like I had enough weight to warrant 2 hours of being so physically angry at the mother. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. It sounds like one that's admirable and tries to go places, but perhaps doesn't quite get there.
And having said it all, I still would recommend everyone sort of see it. I think it's worth a glimpse. It gets almost like that McCullough documentary, a glimpse into this side of life, and particularly American life, and this kind of underbelly that is often ignored or, looked past, and these struggling people, and it is a nice metaphor for them sort of literally stuck right next to Disneyland, like the most magical place on earth, and they there's like a scene where they can see the fireworks every night. They watch the fireworks from like out on the grass in this like shitty motel that they're stuck in.
It's a nice contrast.
It's quite clever. But yeah, Pat didn't love it as much as I hoped or thought that I would. And the only other one that I was a little bit underwhelmed by was Wonderstruck, which is the new Todd Haynes. So this is his follow-up to Carol, which I absolutely loved. Like a few years ago, it might have even been my favourite film of the year, I think, that year. So I was highly anticipating this, and this is apparently an adaptation of a kid's novel, graphic novel, kind of, but I wasn't aware of the subject matter, the source material. And it's kind of two parallel stories. I sort of like the ambition. One is a black and white silent film, actually, about a deaf girl who's in New York running amok, trying to sort of find her mother. And then a modern story, or a more modern story, it's kind of in the 70s, of a young kid who's sort of trying to find this bookshop to unravel this mystery of who his parents and grandparents were and stuff. And I just thought it was fine. Honestly, I was kind of a little bit bored, and I don't think the cutting, but I like the idea of having a silent black and white film and a more modern film sort of running concurrently and cutting between the two. But it was almost a little bit too... Like, the boy gets deafened at one point, so he's also deaf and befriends this other kid, and they end up in this museum. And some of the parallels between the two storylines are a little bit on the nose. And I mean, to be honest, maybe I may have approached this from the wrong angle and expecting it to be a subtle, beautiful film like Carol, when it's actually, in fact, more of a kids' film. Like, it's about kids and for kids. Yeah. And so part of me sort of kind of wants to give it another shot and watch it with that in mind. But from my first viewing, watching it, hoping for something more complex and subtle, it felt a bit cloying and on the nose and didn't really work. And I was just the story was just a little bit flat for me. But interesting ideas, almost worth checking out just to sort of see what he's trying to do, because it's not often that you get to see someone try to do a black and white silent film these days.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like all of these movies were good and trying for something.
Definitely.
Which we always sort of champion on the podcast, but perhaps, it didn't quite achieve
exactly, and they certainly weren't. They weren't sort of down the bottom of my list. They, a lot of these films are like 7 and 8th on my. They're still quite high, but I expected them to be like vying for number 1 when I went in.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're my favourites. I guess the only other couple that I think might be worth mentioning that were like pretty big disappointments, probably down the other end of the spectrum, were Brawl in Cell Block 99, which is the Vince Vaughn film from the director of Bone Tomahawk, which I actually think Bone Tomahawk is quite good. Again, a little bit overhyped, and I feel like the hype for this is very undeserved. I just 100% did not buy Vince Vaughn in the role that he was in. It felt like he was meant to be this lovable criminal that was kind of like wisecracking almost, but his delivery of it, I don't know, I just did not like him at all. And it never built to anything that significant. Like, there's no real brawl in Cell Block 99. Like, it does get the violence in this film is fucking stomach churning. Like, there is one scene in particular, I mean, there's one scene in particular that's very, very, very graphic, but graphic in the sense that it's almost so graphic that it's clearly faked. Like, there's a lot of prosthetics happening, which I like. Like, I love that sort of prosthetics realness. And I kind of like what he's going for, but again, maybe this is expectations, but from what I was led to believe and what I sort of was anticipating was a slow build and then an enormous action, like 70s exploitation-esque brawl, to be this whole prison thing where like he's just almost like what are those, like Escape from New York, or like what's the John Carpenter film with
The Raid,
with the like The Raid, or Assault on Precinct 13 or something like that, where it turns into a really big intense action film, where it's really not, it's more like a series of 3 escalating punch-ups. And it sort of builds, it spends so fucking long getting to the prison, like at least half the film, if not more, and then builds these sort of like 3 levels of like intensity, but they're way too short to have any impact. Like I felt like it's skewed the wrong way, and it should have built up, because he goes into one prison and then has to do something to get him into the maximum security prison, and then has to do something within the maximum security prison to get him into like the worst part of that prison. But it's like all those things happen so quickly, like compared to what happened before, and I never got a chance to like feel the excitement or tension. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's overlong and very overrated, but perhaps worth watching if you like gory practical effects. If you like seeing someone get their face stomped off, then literally get their face stomped off. You can see that in this film. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other one, which is perhaps a little harsh because I didn't dislike this film, but again, I feel like this is an episode about expectations, but I was quite underwhelmed. Which we could have a chat about, John, which is Ingrid Goes West, which you really liked.
Oh wow, yeah, fuck. Yeah, I thought that movie was fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, underwhelmed is probably...
Maybe I
think so. When I say underwhelmed, I've given it like a 3-star review here, so it's not like I disliked it.
Yeah.
But it was quite far down my list in favourite films of MIF. London Film Festival. I think I had maybe not from you, but from sort of stuff that I'd heard, anticipated that it was much darker than it really was. I had the sense that it was going to turn almost actually into a thriller, which obviously doesn't happen.
Okay, yeah. No, not really.
And I don't know, I just felt like you were right about... I liked the sort of Instagram-y culture and the smartphone stuff. Like, that's all pretty bang on the money. But I don't think it really went anywhere with much of it. Like, you see... start to see the darker side of like Ashley Olsen's life. Is that who it is? The woman, the girl that she's stalking, her life and her husband's. Like he potentially has some alcoholism or some sort of drinking problem, and they're not that together. But then it kind of just drops all that straight away, and then I don't know. I expected it to do something a little bit bolder than it did, I guess, I think was my problem.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I would say, I mean, we don't have to...
No, we've already talked about it in length, I suppose, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think the ending is still pretty dark.
The very end, that's true.
The very end sort of brings it back to that sort of darkness without giving anything away.
Yes. Yeah, I think I expected it to almost turn into like a horror film, or like she would turn so fucked up that it would be like...
I can see that. Yeah.
Something really, I don't know, really messed up. But it wasn't that. It's much more a comedy than it is a thriller. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess again, like looking at it through that lens, at least it is tackling or, dealing with interesting subject matter and interesting themes. And like I said, it was like 3 stars for me, so I still enjoyed it. I think I just was expecting something, especially after your glowing review. Maybe my like expectations were too high, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to get something really like cool and crazy here. And it was just like...
Yeah, I think it's that thing that we've talked about a lot of... when I saw it, I think, I had seen the trailer, but I really didn't know too much about it and didn't have those expectations. And again, that makes a huge difference.
Having said all that, I think the best person in that film is her, like the landlord, her friend, who like then becomes her boyfriend.
Oh yeah.
So, who's it like? Isn't it like Ice Cube's son?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm going to send terrible. We can cut that out if that's wrong, but I think it is. Anyway, he is so charismatic. Like, there's just something about it. But then, I mean, that was also another issue that I had with it. I just didn't believe that he would hang around. Like, fuck me. Like, what she does to it straight away, like with the car, it'd be like, done, mate. Like, I just did not buy that he would like keep repeatedly going back and... I don't know, going to parties with her, and she'd just keep fucking him over. I don't know. I didn't buy that.
Yeah, I guess so.
But him, I want to see him in more stuff. Like, he is so charming. So yeah, that's probably the highlights from the festival, I think, John. Like I said, overall, a good festival, but the ones I was really looking forward to were a little underwhelming. But, as always... There's good stuff there, and hopefully this is going to provide tips for people to find things, hunt things down, or, perhaps check something out like Killing of a Sacred Deer or 3 Billboards that they might have not thought was up their alley or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's definitely a few on there that I didn't know about that I'm quite keen on now. Because we haven't chatted about this until just now. So, yeah, that's cool. It's always good to share these thoughts, I think, because it's hard to see some of this stuff, or you just wouldn't know about it otherwise.
Definitely.
So, it's great. I love going to festivals and discovering movies that you wouldn't be able to normally see.
Definitely. Can't wait for the next one.
Oh, yeah.